Hi, I'm Beth. I've been gardening with native plants for over a decade, and on this channel, I'm sharing my journey transforming my Midwestern yard into a native plant paradise that's not only beautiful, but also packed with ecological function. So be sure to subscribe if you want to follow along. I'll be sharing updates to my garden as I transform spaces, information about native plants and how to care for an ecological garden, and I'm always running some kind of weird experiment in my garden, so we can learn together from my dubious ventures. Today we're talking traditional landscape design with native plants. In fact, I decided to make this a three-part series because there is a lot to cover. So be sure and subscribe and get notifications so that you can tune in to parts 2 and 3. So today we're going to address a dirty little secret of gardening with native plants, which is that it can look a little messy. And maybe that doesn't bother you. Great. Or maybe that's the thing that's been holding you back from planting more natives, which is totally understandable. Regardless of what camp you're in, I'm going to encourage you to consider, for your front yard at least, a more traditional manicured look for your native garden, because that's what people are going to see. Now, maybe you don't mind a wild looking yard and you don't really see the point, but having an impact is going to take a lot of people changing their landscapes, not just a few. I'm on a mission to get as many people as I can to plant native plants, and most of those people just don't want a messy looking yard. Now, there's an assumption baked in here that native plants look ugly or messy, which isn't necessarily true. If you plant showy natives in a traditional way with space between and a whole lot of mulch, they're going to look very tidy and very traditional. Unfortunately, if you want the supposed benefits of a native garden, you need to have plant density and diversity. And you need to manage your garden with ecological maintenance practices. And all of that can look a little messy if you aren't thoughtful. What I want to share with you today is the concept of messy ecosystems with orderly frames. Basically, we'll look at what makes a traditional landscape look beautiful and well cared for, and use those elements in our native plant gardens, even if we're hardly using any traditional ornamental plants at all. This concept was pioneered by Joan, Iverson, Nassauer in a paper of the same name. And by the way, it's definitely worth a read. It's not very long. If you're interested, I'll have the PDF to an article down in the description. Definitely worth a read. So the basic premise is that human inhabited spaces look good when we can detect that they are being cared for by humans. They both put us at ease and look aesthetically pleasing. If we can't detect care, we see neglect, not nature. And by the way, this is true of any style of garden, even a naturalistic style garden. If it's not obviously cared for, reads as neglected and not natural. Iverson Nassauer calls these traces of human intervention cues to care. To really quickly illustrate what I'm talking about, take this house, for example. Even if it's not your style, we can probably agree it's fairly attractive. We wouldn't mind living next to the people who live in this house. So what makes it look nice? It's got a lawn, a neat border of plants. There are window boxes filled with flowers. There is a path leading up to the front door. All of these things show that this place is being cared for. They show intention and design, upkeep and maintenance. A space being maintained makes us feel safe, and it communicates that the person who lives here cares what we think. They made it beautiful for us. To make native gardens look attractive and cared for, we need to use this visual vocabulary to communicate those things as well. Cues to care. Here are a few examples of cues to care and how you can use them in your native garden. The first one is a lawn. Now, I know, we want to make our lawns smaller and we want to plant more natives, but hear me out. It makes sense to keep some areas as turf grass in our design. A mown lawn is an easy shorthand for care. Even an ugly or boring yard looks well cared for if the lawn is freshly mowed and edged. So use that to your advantage. Another way to show care is clearly defined edges. Now, in your native landscape, you're likely going to have some areas that look a little wild. They will look attractive though if you clearly define the edge. This shows intention. Use edging materials such as stone, metal, brick, or areas of lawn again, or well-defined paths with pavers or turf. Another way to keep your native garden looking beautiful is by using those principles of traditional border design. Shorter plants in the front, taller plants in the back. If you've got some Joe Pye weed that's towering over the sidewalk, intimidating people who walk by, that doesn't feel thoughtful. But toward the back of the border, closer to the house, that same Joe Pye weed can look fantastic. Another way to show cues to care is to incorporate foundation plantings, just like you would in a traditional landscape. So using shrubs or small trees. These plants don't die back in the winter, so they're going to help maintain the structure of your design during those colder months. Another way to make your planting beautiful is to limit the plant palette to shorter plants, under about 3 feet. Most ornamental plants are bred to be about 2 or 3 feet tall, so keeping your front yard plants to this height will go a long way toward looking intentional. By the way, I'll go into more specifics with plant choices in my next video. I don't want to get too bogged down in plant lists here, but part 2 is going to include some examples of how these ideas play out, and I'll share some plant ideas there, so stay tuned. Another way to keep your native garden looking beautiful and well cared for is to limit the color palette of the blooms. If there are only a couple colors blooming at any given time, your garden looks beautiful and intentional. It's important also to somewhat limit the overall number of species. You should have few enough species that you're able to repeat a plant a few times throughout the planting, but you also want enough variety that you have something blooming from early spring into fall, at least if you're gardening someplace like I am in the upper Midwest. And you also want enough variety of types of plants that can share space effectively, both above ground and below ground. Another way that you can show cues to care is to incorporate blocks of monoculture plantings, or one type of plant planted as a block. This could, again, just be your lawn if you wanted to go with that. Or there are also a lot of natives that can look great planted this way. Prairie dropseed is a great example. It looks fantastic planted as a block or in a row. And this kind of planting shows intention, but it's not the most ecological way to plant, so be sure to also include some mixed plantings as well. And don't forget about other things. It's not just plants. Include sculptures or other kinds of garden art. Birdhouses, a fountain, something that's beautiful and deliberately added to the garden that didn't just grow. Signs educating people about native plants are also a great way to let people know what you're doing and teach them a little bit about the benefits of natives. You can get these from sites like Prairie Moon, or get your yard certified with one of the many conservation organizations like Homegrown National Park, Wild Ones, Conservation at Home, Monarch Watch, Pollinator Partnership, and more. So if you want to create a yard that goes beyond beautiful and offers ecological function and benefits wildlife, start thinking beyond your own yard. Think about changing some hearts and minds by creating a beautiful front yard that will get your friends and neighbors excited about native plants too. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the rest of the series. In part 2, I'll share some examples of how you can put these ideas into practice. And in part 3, we'll talk about ideas for mixing native plants with traditional ornamental plants. Thanks so much. See you next time.